We're using tools here, folks. The towel's too bouncy. It's kind of like a spider. Should always be within 10 feet of a knife. Hello, my name is Stephen Holm and I am with Homegrounds, and I'm gonna draw a picture for you. It's the holidays and you are going to family's house to enjoy the time, and you are a great guest, so you brought a bag of coffee, and you're an even better guest because you brought a bag of whole bean coffee because you know that you should always grind coffee fresh before brewing it. However, disaster strikes. Your family, they don't own a coffee grinder, but it is your fault. You should have known to always bring a coffee grinder with you wherever you go. Now, if you ever find yourself in this horrible situation, you might be able to find a way out by grinding coffee without a coffee grinder, using one of these things. I'm gonna try them out for you. We're gonna find out if they work, how well they work, and if I would recommend it. We'll start with the ones that I don't believe will work super well. Let's start by using a knife. I'm starting with a knife for a couple reasons. First, because I have fairly low hopes for this. Also, I believe that there should always be a knife somewhere nearby. It's kind of like a spider. You should always be within 10 feet of a knife. Because I remember hearing one time that there's always like a spider within a certain amount of feet of you. There should always be a knife nearby, no matter where you are. There's not much to say about the technique for this one. We'll just try it out. There is coffee flying everywhere. If you also have safety glasses, not a bad idea. Technically, it's working. Can't say much about the effectiveness or the efficiency. I probably should have said, try at your own risk. We're using a knife. Be smart. The coffee beans have broken into pieces. You're not gonna get very finely ground coffee out of this, but maybe something really coarse for French press or clever dripper with a really long brew time, something like that. I will give the knife method a 3 out of 10. It works, but only 3's much. Right, moving on to method number 2, a rolling pin. I don't know if I should put something between the rolling pin and the beans, but let's try it. Okay, I'm gonna do what I should have done to start with. Maybe put something over coffee grounds. Hey, that works. Not half bad. They're still very uneven, and I don't know how fine we'd be able to get this. Let me go a little bit longer and see if I can get it finer. I am actually fairly surprised with this method. You can definitely brew coffee with this. I would give the rolling pin a solid 5 out of 10. Made coffee grounds. They're not even, but they're there and you could brew coffee with it. Moving on to a similar method, a hammer. I have this, standard hammer. I've cleaned up even less because I'm learning my lessons. I'm also going to immediately put a towel over this, and I'm wondering if I'm about to damage my table. Take another precaution here. The towel's too bouncy. Another board here that I don't care about. Once again, proceed with caution. We're using tools here, folks. They're grinding. If you try to do this without a towel, yeah, okay, bad idea. It's hard to know where full beans are, so I have like a couple whole beans here in the middle of all of this. Consistency, once again, we're using a hammer. I am going to give this a 4 out of 10. Maybe if you had a giant hammer, like a mallet or a meat tenderizer, those might work a little better. Now moving on to something else. Okay, moving on to something a little more sophisticated. We have a mortar and pestle. Mortar and pestle? Mortar and pestle? I don't know if you pronounce the T. I actually have some higher hopes with this method because these are used to make, you know, grind up stuff for powders and whatnot. So my table has not suffered any damage so far, so we are going to keep it that way. I'm also not positive on the proper technique of using a mortar and pestle. Check that out. It's working. Okay, so I've been grinding for a couple minutes now. Coffee is ground fairly fine. It does require probably the most work. Mortar and pestle, I would give a 8 out of 10. Ground the coffee really well. Some inconsistencies and a good amount of work, but definitely brew coffee with it. All right, now moving on to our electric options. First, a blender. I don't own a normal stand-up blender. I have this immersion one, which I think will work pretty much just as well. I'm not sure if this is the best vessel to be doing this in, but give it a shot. Oh, Jesus. This is definitely, hold on, this is not the right way to do this. Okay, if you're using an immersion blender, use something deeper. Hopefully that's more obvious to you than it was to me. And just so you know, we are not wasting any good coffee today. This is all coffee donated to me by a roastery that was just gonna toss it anyways. It's not good enough to brew with. Now, let's try that again. Let's acknowledge the obvious problem I've made here, and that you should use an enclosed blender. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be very similar to a blade coffee grinder. They're not the best. They sort of just cut up all the beans, really inconsistent. We have some whole beans here amidst some like finer particles. I'm gonna give this method a 6 out of 10. It's just very inconsistent, but very little work. So, blender. Yeah. Okay, on to our last method, the food processor. I have a feeling this will be very similar to the blender, in that there's just some blades. Also, if you own a food processor, I feel like you probably own a coffee grinder, but it's not doing anything. I think it's just flinging all the coffee beans around. Unfortunately, it worked terribly. I have a bunch of beans left, so we'll just dump a bunch in. Like I said, we're not wasting these. They're gonna be thrown out anyway. Maybe I'll use them for a face scrub. I could smell the motor starting to heat up, so that's not good. But adding more coffee definitely did help. So I think in order to use a food processor, you just need to use more coffee. We already have quite the mess going, so what's a little bit more? Oh, Jesus. So, looking at this, I take back what I said. This is not working out very well at all. It's really inconsistent. I don't recommend this. I would give the food processor a 1 out of 10 because it did things, but just barely. So now you know, you are with family and you brought whole bean coffee, don't have a grinder. Don't use a food processor. If you have a mortar and pestle, highly recommend that. And all the other ones are just fine. Thank you so much for watching. If you have Any other recommendations, leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. And until next time, happy brewing. Oh my gosh, there's coffee everywhere. It's everywhere. I am lucky that my dog will eat anything except coffee. Gotta do what you gotta do to get coffee, am I right? With the towel on top, I can't see anything that's underneath. Now maybe if you had a see-through towel, I don't think that's a thing. There's so much coffee everywhere.